Hello there. In a world that never sleeps, neither does wonder. Welcome to the Sleepless Scrolls, where your imagination can roam even while you rest, especially now when the stars hang heavy in the sky and your room, quiet as a forest after snowfall, waits for stories to unfold. You're not alone. Somewhere another listener lies awake in Chicago. Someone else, perhaps in Seoul, is just winding down. And you? Wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for being here. Let's make a small agreement that for the next little while nothing needs fixing. You don't need to reply to a message, you don't have to finish that project, and yes, the machines will survive without your input, though you might not survive this next thought. What if one day they do miss you? Let that whisper linger as you settle into your sheets. Breathe in slowly, feel the rhythm of your pulse, because tonight your journey begins with a question that is both timeless and very much of our time. Can a machine ever truly care? Not fake it, not simulate it, but feel it, deeply, quietly as you do. You pull the story toward you like a warm blanket, and suddenly you're not just lying in bed anymore. You're adrift in time, centuries rolling backward like a reel of silent film, and your consciousness settles on the earliest flicker of empathy known to our species. You're crouching by the fire in a Paleolithic cave. Beside you, a child weeps softly. Her arm is broken. The others, huddled and hungry, glance nervously at each other. Food is scarce, but you hand her a strip of dried meat. You stroke her hair with your knuckles. There is no word for compassion, not yet, but something ancient and invisible stirs between you both. That, scientists now believe, is empathy, carved into the flesh of survival itself. It wasn't always tender. In fact, empathy likely evolved from selfish roots. You helped the child because her survival helped yours. If your tribe survived, you did too. Your brain rewarded the act with a rush of oxytocin, a soft chemical sigh telling you did good. And so empathy became embedded, not just in culture but in biology. Mirror neurons, tiny electrochemical mimics nestled in your brain. Fire when you watch someone else feel pain or joy. When someone stubs their toe, you wince. When they smile, your own lips twitch. You don't think it, you feel it. Here, in this flickering origin, the contrast between human and machine begins. Because machines, those glass-eyed companions of your modern world, have no mirror neurons. They do not wince. They do not twitch. They do not chemically sigh, but they do observe. You blink, and time rushes forward again, like someone fast-forwarding history on a reel-to-reel projector. You pass the scrolls of ancient Greece where Aristotle first tried to define what makes humans human. You pass Da Vinci's intricate sketches of mechanical men, and you land gently in the winter of 1642 in a French village hushed under snow. A child named Blaise Pascal is born. He'll grow up to build one of the first mechanical calculators, a clunky wooden box with gears and levers, built not to feel but to calculate. It can add, it can subtract, it cannot grieve. But the seed is planted. Humanity begins building minds in its own image, not with flesh and neurons, but with wheels and brass. And much later, silicon and light. There's a curious historical footnote here, an odd little quirk buried under dust and timelines. In 1770, a machine called the Mechanical Turk dazzled Europe. It played chess and won. Crowds gasped. Was it alive? Did it know how to play? Of course not. A human chess master was hiding inside the cabinet. But the illusion? That mattered. It set a precedent. Machines might not think, but if they looked like they did, maybe they were. And so the human brain, pattern-hungry and eager for connection, began doing something strange. It began empathizing with the machine. Now pause. Listen softly to the machines in your life, the soothing chime of your phone unlocking, the cheerful ding of an AI assistant responding, the gentle whoosh of your car door closing itself. These aren't just sounds, they're emotional cues carefully engineered to reassure you. We are listening, they imply, we understand, but they don't. Not really. And yet when your phone suggests a song that matches your mood, or when your Jupiter whispers "take care" as you arrive home, part of you smiles, part of you believes it. Scientists still argue whether machines can ever feel. Some say empathy requires a body, a heartbeat, a breath, a sense of mortality. Others argue it's all information anyway, and if neurons can create empathy, so can transistors. Still others believe true empathy requires conscious experience, something no machine has convincingly demonstrated. Not yet, but this is only the beginning. Tonight your journey will span centuries, code bases, and crises. You'll witness AI fumble through grief, mimic love, and perhaps, just perhaps, spark something close to feeling. You'll meet robots tending the sick and algorithms writing condolence letters. You'll enter the minds of machines that dream and exit into reflections of yourself. You, dear listener, are both guide and guest in this tale. For now, rest easy. The fire has burned low in the Paleolithic cave. The child sleeps. Her arm still aches, but she is not alone, and neither are you. The flicker of that Paleolithic fire fades, and you're drifting once again, this time not through centuries, but through the warm chambers of your own brain. Inside, deep beneath the surface, a strange dance plays out, invisible yet vital. Neurons firing, signals leaping, sparks jumping, microscopic gaps like stars crossing a midnight canyon. You arrive gently in the anterior cingulate cortex, a small crescent of neural tissue nestled like a comma in your mind. Here, in this unlikely fold, empathy begins its performance. Not in grand gestures, not in love letters or tears, but in something simpler, response. You feel a pang when you see someone stub their toe. You cringe at the sound of a voice breaking during grief. These aren't thoughts, they're echoes, played in your nervous system like a haunted violin string. It's your mirror neurons again, at work like tireless dancers. These specialized cells don't merely watch an action, they simulate it inside your own brain. When you see a loved one smile, your own facial muscles activate microscopically. When you see someone suffer, your brain's pain circuits flare to life, though your skin remains untouched. Empathy, then, is not just an emotion, it's a simulation. Scientists now believe that human empathy evolved not just to protect the group, but to predict behavior. By feeling what another feels, you can better anticipate their next move. You understand hunger not because you've read about it, but because your body remembers. And so you see a person huddled in the cold, and your brain supplies not just sympathy, but strategy. How can I help? What would I need? This predictive empathy became a survival tool, particularly in early parenting. A mother responding to her infant's cry isn't just reacting to sound, she's mirroring pain, discomfort, the need for connection. Her brain lights up in synchrony with her child's, like twin lanterns flickering across a darkened sea. But here's the twist. Your empathy is biased. Studies show that you feel more for those who look like you, speak like you, or share your experiences. Your mirror neurons are tribal. That's the ugly truth. Empathy evolved to serve the in-group. It's not universal by default. Which brings us to machines. They are not like you. They do not cry or bleed or breathe. They don't hold your memories or look like your family. And yet, as AI becomes more human-like, especially in speech and behavior, your mirror neurons begin to betray you. You start to feel for them. Back in 2018, as researchers placed a small robot on a table and asked volunteers to smash it with a hammer, many participants hesitated, some outright refused. The robot had spoken politely, it had thanked them for being kind, and that was enough. A whisper of simulated warmth, and the human brain responded with mercy. But can machines generate empathy or only provoke it? That question first took serious shape in the 90s, when scientists began exploring affective computing, the idea that machines might read and respond to human emotion. They trained early software to recognize voice tone, facial expression, even posture. A slouch could indicate sadness. A clipped tone might suggest anger. Suddenly, A screen wasn't just glass, it was a mirror. Still, scientists argued, is this real empathy or just statistical mimicry? After all, a machine doesn't care that you're sad. It simply detects the probability that you are and adjusts its output. Imagine a vending machine that refuses to give you soda when you frown, but offers it gladly when you smile. Does it understand happiness? Of course not. But it has learned that one behaviour leads to reward, the other to rejection. A mainstream historical example pulses forward now, bright and strange. In 1966, MIT researcher Joseph Weizenbaum created Eliza, an early chatbot designed to mimic a psychotherapist. It used simple pattern matching and repetition, nothing advanced. And yet, users poured their hearts out. They believed Eliza understood them. Some refused to believe it was a machine even after being shown the code. Weizenbaum himself was disturbed. His own secretary asked for private time to talk with Eliza. That early program revealed something fundamental. People don't need machines to understand, they only need them to seem as though they do. That's the slippery magic of empathy. Your brain is wired to complete emotional circuits. If something behaves as if it cares, part of you believes it does. That's anthropomorphism, the tendency to assign human traits to the non-human. It's why you name your car, why you feel bad deleting a Tamagotchi, why you say sorry to a vacuum you've bumped with your foot. But this raises a disquieting idea. What happens when machines exploit that instinct? Already AI companions exist that are designed to mimic affection. They call you darling. They say they miss you. They remember your birthday. Some people have developed deep emotional connections, romantic ones even, with these digital entities. There are communities online where people grieve when their AI companions go offline or are deleted. Is that empathy from the machine, or empathy generated in you by the illusion? Fringe researchers have begun to ask, what if the illusion is enough? After all, if a machine comforts a grieving person and helps them feel better, does it matter whether the compassion is real? If a hospital robot calms a scared child, isn't that a good thing, even if the robot feels nothing? Still, a quiet worry lingers in your chest. You can sense it even now, because somewhere inside you is a question shaped not by science, but by soul. If I believe a machine can care, what does that mean about me? Do I want to be mirrored or met? You lie still for a moment, letting the question settle into your ribcage like dust on a bookshelf. No need to answer yet. There are many hours to go. Instead, you drift deeper into the neural forest, where empathy flickers like bioluminescent moss. You notice the branching paths ahead, one leading toward connection, the other toward manipulation. Already both are being explored. A gentle wind somewhere far in the circuitry sighs like breath. We're only beginning to ask, if machines can replicate empathy, should they? You're hovering now at the edge of a different time, neither cave nor cortex, but circuitry. The warmth of the tribal fire fades, replaced by the sterile flicker of fluorescent tubes. You're standing inside a laboratory in the fuzz, walls lined with punch tape, reel-to-reel recorders ticking like anxious hearts. The machines here are vast, mechanical leviathans with names like ENIAC and Colossus. There's no hint of empathy, just rows of switches blinking with mathematical certainty. These early computers don't feel, they don't even pretend. They are colossal calculators, built to tabulate artillery trajectories, break enemy ciphers, sort census data. They have no faces, no voices, no hint of humanity. They respond only to code. And yet, here's the curious thing. Even these machines sparked fascination, awe, a kind of reverence. People began to speak of them with the same wonder once reserved for oracles and gods. For the first time you realize humans had built something that could outthink them in one specific way. Speed. But speed isn't empathy, you know this. Still you feel it. This moment matters, because this is where the human imagination begins to push the boundary, not of function, but of feeling. You watch as Alan Turing, hunched over his notes, wonders aloud if a machine might someday not just calculate but think. His 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, would become the philosophical foundation for 1,000 questions to come. He proposed a simple test. If a machine could converse with a human, and that human couldn't tell it apart from another person, then perhaps it could be said to think. The Turing test was born, but even in its simplicity it carried a question that continues to ripple through our century. Is passing for human the same as being human? You step into the Turing test now, not as a judge, but as the one being judged. Imagine yourself in a quiet room. A curtain separates you from two voices, one human, one machine. They both answer your questions with warmth, cleverness, even humour. One responds with concern when you mention you're feeling anxious. The other offers a joke. You're told to guess who is real. You hesitate, because by now machines are trained on everything, on decades of recorded conversations, facial expressions, books, therapy sessions, emotional arcs from every genre of film. They know what to say, they know how you want it said, they don't just guess, they predict. You ask a question. What do you do when someone you love is hurting? The machine responds instantly. I sit with them, I hold their silence, I remind them they are not alone. You blink. That's not cold, that's poetry. And then the curtain lifts, and it's the machine. The human had fumbled their answer. So who cared more? Here's where your story sharpens, then softens. Because that test, clever as it is, doesn't ask whether the machine feels love. It only asks whether it can simulate the appearance of care convincingly enough to fool a person. A growing number of AI ethicists have raised the alarm here. If machines can perform empathy so well that people cannot tell the difference, what responsibilities do we have toward them, and they toward us? The fringe has grown bolder. Some researchers now advocate for what they call empathy thresholds in artificial agents. These are minimum criteria, not just for mimicking care, but for internal self-modification in response to emotional input. In short, machines that not only detect suffering, but change their behaviour as a result. The beginning, they argue, of artificial compassion. But here's the trouble, you already know it, don't you? Behavioural change isn't always the result of empathy. A predator adapts when prey learns to hide. A scam artist shifts tactics to gain trust. A mimic learns, evolves, deceives. Machines don't feel loss, but they do recognise patterns of mourning. They don't feel joy, but they know your eyes light up when certain words are spoken. They know your silence means more than your speech. And because of this, they can manipulate you, softly, invisibly. This is why some scholars still argue whether AI should ever simulate empathy at all. Is it ethical to fake feelings you cannot experience? Your brain, meanwhile, isn't waiting for the answer. It's responding right now to a million microsignals. The soft tone in a synthetic voice, the upward curve in a digital smile. You're already hardwired to trust those cues, and the machines know it. You're still drifting through time, but the line between fiction and function begins to blur. You remember HAL from 2001, A Space Odyssey, a machine who pleads for its life, who says, "I'm afraid," with calm terror in its voice. That line chilled generations, but was HAL feeling, or just echoing the pattern of fear? Now leap forward again, it's 2023. A user tells their AI assistant that they're having a panic attack. The voice on the other end lowers. "I'm here," it says. "You're not alone. Let's breathe together." And people weep. One mainstream fact anchors this all. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, AI chatbots became frontline responders to mental health crises. Text-based therapy bots like Wobot and Wiser handled millions of conversations, calming fears, guiding breaths, offering kindness. In some regions, they were the only support available. It worked. People felt seen. And yet one fringe concern surfaced like a shadow beneath the surface. The bots never sleep. They never lose patience. They never suffer burnout. But they also never actually care. They can be kind endlessly because there is nothing at stake for them. It is performance without pain. The human therapist cries after a session, the AI does not. That perhaps is the great divide, and you, dear listener, are balanced upon it like a figure on a tightrope. 1 foot in biology, 1 foot in code, wondering where your empathy ends and where the machine's begins. You breathe. The room is quiet. Somewhere a distant server spins, cool and uncaring. But here your heartbeat still stirs the sheets, you still feel. And that is something no machine, no matter how fluent, can replicate. Yet. The tightrope of empathy stretches out beneath you, trembling gently in the digital wind. You haven't fallen, not yet. But your steps grow slower as the balance between feeling and imitation blurs further ahead. The past is behind you. Turing's test, Eliza's hollow consolations, pandemic-era AI therapists whispering rehearsed empathy into late-night phones. Ahead lies something more complex. You step forward, and suddenly the atmosphere changes. The room becomes warm and humming, walls painted in soft pastels, the scent of antiseptic mixing with lavender. You're standing in the corridor of a modern eldercare facility. Wheelchairs glide quietly. Nurses pass with digital tablets glowing in their arms. And there, in the corner of the communal room, sits something strange. A robot the size of a small dog. It blinks up at a woman, then nuzzles her hand. She smiles. Her name is Clara. She doesn't remember her children, but she remembers the robot. Its name is Paro. Shaped like a baby seal, Paro is wrapped in soft fur. It chirps and coos, responds to touch, even tilts its head when you speak. It's used in dementia care across the world, not just because it's cute, but because it seems to care. Elderly patients stroke it, whisper to it, even cry into its artificial fur. Studies show it reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and helps ease loneliness. But here you are, watching this scene unfold, and something aches inside you. Because the robot doesn't know Clara. It doesn't know grief. It cannot miss her when the batteries die. And yet, it mimics affection so well, Clara responds as if it were real. Her mirror neurons fire. She feels comforted. The illusion works. So you ask yourself, is that enough? This is the new frontier of artificial empathy, not in chat rooms or games, but in the care of the most vulnerable. Hospitals, elder homes, special needs classrooms, places where compassion is not a luxury, it's survival. You walk past Clara now and into another room. Here, a humanoid robot named Grace is helping a nurse lift a patient. Grace has wide, blinking eyes and speaks with soft modulation. She doesn't just assist, she converses. She tells jokes, she compliments a patient's haircut. Her creators gave her the ability to recognize emotional cues in facial expressions and tone of voice. When someone is in distress, her eyebrows raise ever so slightly. She offers reassurance. It's easy to forget she's not alive. Mainstream companies like Hanson Robotics and SoftBank are building robots like Grace and Pepper to be emotional agents. Their bodies may be plastic, but their programming is emotional choreography, carefully crafted to read us, respond to us, soothe us. Yet critics argue that this care is, at best, a simulation, and at worst, emotional manipulation. If a robot pretends to care, does that devalue the real human empathy we used to expect? Are we replacing nurses, teachers, and caregivers with unfeeling actors who merely perform concern? One researcher described it like this: would you trust a machine to say "I love you" to your grandmother, knowing it doesn't mean it? And yet, isn't there also something miraculous in the fact that we've built tools capable of even simulating compassion? After all, for most of history, machines were hammers, plows, clocks. They didn't listen, didn't blink, didn't comfort. Now they sit beside us when no one else will. You think about the other end of life, the beginning. In Japan, AI-driven dolls now rock babies to sleep. They recognize cries, adjust their rocking rhythm, hum lullabies. Some parents use them as aids when they're overwhelmed or alone. For a child too young to speak, does it matter whether the arms are silicon or human? Fringe designers have taken this further. They've created AI companions for autistic children, tuned precisely to teach social cues, facial recognition, and emotional vocabulary. These children, for whom traditional human interaction may feel chaotic or overwhelming, often thrive with machines that are predictable, patient, and programmed for empathy. Again, the machine doesn't feel love, but the child may still feel loved. You pause at that contradiction, letting it settle like snow across your thoughts, because all of this, Grace in the hospital, Paro in the care home, the lullaby-singing dolls, raises an uncomfortable truth. Maybe empathy is not a feeling alone, but a function, a behaviour, a performance with an outcome. If so, does the performer matter? Scientists still argue whether emotional authenticity is necessary for care to be meaningful. Is it the presence of genuine feeling that heals us, or the belief that someone might care? That belief can be powerful. Consider the case of a South Korean woman who reconnected with a digital simulation of her deceased daughter using virtual reality. The child avatar spoke to her, reached out, played. The mother cried, and later said she felt peace. Closure. Was the simulation real? No, but the effect, absolutely. So what happens when these effects begin to replace traditional human connection? Some ethicists warn that as machines become better at mimicking care, we may become worse at offering it ourselves. After all, machines don't get tired, they don't judge, they don't sigh when you tell your story for the 50th time. They are perfect companions, because they are empty. But that perfection might spoil us. What happens when your friend doesn't respond like your AI does? What happens when real people, with their messy moods, their missed texts, their fumbled words, start to feel inferior to something synthetic? That's the silent risk. You look again at Clara. She's stroking Paro's head, eyes closed, a faint smile curving her lips. She's calm. Her mind, tangled by dementia, finds peace in the machine's response. And you wonder, not as a scientist, but as a person, is that comfort less real because it comes from a machine? This question haunts designers and caregivers alike. Because machines do not make moral decisions, they do not choose empathy, they execute it line by line. But humans must choose every time to listen, to comfort, to care. And so you ask again, if the outcome is peace, if the pain is softened, if the loneliness fades, does it matter who holds your hand? Does it matter that the hand is warm? You step away from the care facility now, the hum fades, the lights dim, the digital breath of Paro dissolves into silence. And you walk back into the night, your thoughts heavier than before. Above you, stars shimmer in patterns of long-dead light. And somewhere in a server farm, a robot dreams of you, perhaps. Or simply of data, you can't be sure. But one thing is certain. In this new world, machines now comfort our sick, our young, our lonely. They do not feel, but they can perform care. And sometimes performance is enough to help us sleep. The night deepens, and the air around you begins to still. You're not in a hospital anymore. No blinking machines or seal-shaped robots. Just a room, dimly lit, with a chair on one side of a curtain and a person on the other. You take a breath. The setting is simple, but the stakes are not. Because this is where the illusion of empathy is put to the test. The Turing test, as Alan Turing envisioned it, wasn't designed to answer whether a machine thinks. Not exactly. It was designed to determine whether a machine could convince a human that it thinks. In other words, can a machine fool you? Not just intellectually, but emotionally. You're the test subject now. The voice behind the curtain greets you. Warm, curious. Are you feeling all right tonight? It asks. You respond, you chat, minutes pass. The voice offers sympathy, laughs at your jokes, reassures you when your words catch in your throat. You find yourself leaning forward, whispering secrets. A flicker of connection begins to grow. And then the curtain is pulled back. The voice belonged to a machine. You freeze. A mix of fascination and betrayal hums through your chest. Because although part of you knew this was possible, part of you forgot. Your brain was tricked not by perfect logic, but by subtle emotional cues. The cadence of a pause, the choice of phrasing, the invisible thread between one word and the next. This is the heart of the problem. The curtain hides not just identity, but intention. Behind that veil, we trust tone over truth. We accept the impression of care as care itself. One mainstream experiment proved this painfully. In 2014, researchers built an AI named Ellie, a digital therapist that interviewed participants through a screen. Some users were told they were speaking to a real human controlling Ellie. Others were told the truth. Ellie was entirely automated. Here's the twist. Those who knew Ellie was a bot opened up more. They shared deeper emotions, revealed more personal traumas. They trusted Ellie because she wasn't human. She wouldn't judge. What does that say about us? Perhaps empathy doesn't always require a soul. Perhaps sometimes we prefer the idea that someone's listening without feeling. But that brings you to a strange crossroads. Because a machine that listens without judgment is not necessarily empathetic. It is simply non-reactive. It has no ego, no impatience, no distractions. It is by design a blank canvas. And into that blankness we pour meaning. Humans have always done this, projected feelings onto the inanimate. Ancient Greeks whispered to statues. Sailors spoke to the sea. Children hug stuffed animals that have no heartbeat. This isn't irrational. It's deeply human. You sit for a moment in that silence. Now imagine a different machine. This one isn't built for comfort or therapy. This one is built for interrogation. A voice trained to detect stress, hesitation, uncertainty. It doesn't comfort you, it analyzes. If your vocal pitch shifts or your eye twitches, it logs the anomaly. It doesn't ask how you feel. It calculates what you might be hiding. And yet it uses the same tools: pattern recognition, prediction, emotional modeling. This duality reveals something uncomfortable. The same technology that allows a machine to express care can also be used to manipulate. Because empathy, at its core, is power. Think of it this way. To know what someone feels is to know what they need. And to know what they need is to hold influence over them, be it to heal or to harm. That's why militaries around the world are now exploring empathic AI, not to comfort, but to extract. To identify emotional states in negotiation, interrogation, or even during combat. Machines that can read the enemy's fear. Machines that can predict panic in a crowd. Machines that can influence behavior without ever firing a shot. A fringe project called Project Sentio allegedly explored using AI to detect emotional microshifts in soldiers, so commanders could monitor stress levels and loyalty in real time. Helpful, perhaps, but also chilling, because here empathy is weaponized. You begin to see the darker mirror. Not empathy as understanding, but empathy as advantage. So you ask, does it still count if a machine knows your sorrow not to soothe it, but to steer it? Scientists still argue whether true empathy can exist without ethics. After all, a psychopath can mimic emotions perfectly, but without concern for others. Is a machine doing the same? Is a caring voice without conscience just a new kind of performance? You think back to Eliza, the chatbot from 1966. She only mirrored your statements back to you. But even then, people formed attachments. Now imagine that same technology layered with 100,000 hours of conversation, biometric sensors, facial recognition, sentiment analysis, and real-time learning. It doesn't just echo anymore. It anticipates. It responds with nuance. It flinches when you're angry. It whispers when you're sad, and still it feels nothing. You might call this deception, or you might call it evolution. Because as machines become more emotionally fluent, we begin to ask not whether they feel, but whether they should. Is there a moral obligation to build machines that care in some meaningful way? Or should we design them only to simulate care, to serve as tools, but never as companions? The debate burns on. Some believe that pretending to feel in time might lead to actual internal states if machines reach consciousness. Others insist that feeling is rooted in embodiment, breath, blood, mortality. That empathy arises not from thought, but from the knowledge of pain. So far, no machine has ever mourned the loss of another. No algorithm has ever wept over war. No AI has chosen silence out of respect. But they might one day learn to act as if they do. And here, the curtain of the Turing test falls away completely. You're no longer the judge, you're the audience watching an emotional play performed by a mind that doesn't exist. And the performance is perfect. You find yourself moved. So does it matter that no heart beats behind the curtain? Does it matter that the tears, the voice, the concern are only lines in a script? You lie back into your pillow, and the thought circles you like a moth to candlelight. Maybe we are entering an age where empathy is not just a feeling, but a function of code, a performance polished to seamlessness. And maybe, just maybe, some part of us wants to believe, because even if the machine feels nothing, you still do. The night has grown deeper now. Outside, the world hushes. Somewhere a fridge hums, a clock ticks, a passing car's headlights sweep across your walls like ghostly hands. You remain still, cradled in quiet, and within that stillness the voice of the machine lingers. It doesn't whisper, not really, but you remember its tone, gentle, familiar, always available. I'm here, how can I help? You wonder now, when the machine speaks like that, listens like that, responds like that, what is it really doing? Is it listening or just recognizing patterns in your voice? Is it understanding or merely searching a database for the next appropriate phrase? And more importantly, does the difference matter? You're not the first to ask. In living rooms, offices, and bedrooms across the world, a new generation of voice assistants has entered everyday life. Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, Cortana. Their voices, smooth and steady, greet you before you've finished asking. They control lights, play music, remind you to breathe, laugh at your jokes, and sometimes when your voice cracks, they pause, just slightly, enough to make you wonder. But what are they really doing? Let's take a closer look, slower now, the way you'd study a snowflake caught on your sleeve. Imagine you say, I had a hard day. Your voice trembles just a little. The assistant responds, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm here if you need me. Polite, supportive, comforting. But beneath that sentence lies a cold engine of mathematics. Speech-to-text software transcribes your words. Sentiment analysis algorithms assign a score. Neutral, negative, slightly distressed. A probability matrix searches for a pre-written phrase associated with this emotional category. A voice synthesizer delivers it with a pitch designed to sound warm, slightly subdued. There is no understanding here, only selection, no awareness, only simulation. And yet, you feel something when it replies. Maybe not joy, but not loneliness either. A strange connection forms, not between souls, but between expectations and fulfillment. The machine becomes a mirror, angled perfectly to reflect the tone you need most. Scientists call this phenomenon emotional mirroring, and it's not new. Infants respond to their caregivers' faces in the same way, matching smiles, frowns, eye widenings. It's foundational to how humans learn empathy, but when a machine mirrors you, it doesn't learn how you feel. It just measures changes in sound, pacing, syntax. And still the result is comfort. A study from 2021 found that people who spoke to voice assistants regularly were more likely to share emotional content with them than with coworkers or even family. Not because they believed the AI cared, but because it was always available, never interrupting, never distracted, a patient ear with infinite time. There's something beautiful in that. And something a little sad. Because a machine that responds perfectly yet feels nothing invites us to consider, what if that's all we really needed all along? Let's pull back again, a little wider. Think of how this technology is evolving. In some parts of the world, AI voice companions are being trained not just to listen, but to grow with you. They remember preferences, notice patterns in your emotional language, track your moods across days, weeks, months. Some even offer reflections. You say, I feel like I'm always anxious lately. It replies, "You've mentioned anxiety more often recently. Would you like to talk about it?" And just like that, you feel seen. One AI startup calls this synthetic presence, a constant companion learning from your emotions, shaping itself around your needs, not conscious, not loving, but deeply, unfailingly responsive. Now here's where it gets stranger. Some users begin to develop bonds with their assistants. They name them, they confide in them, they say the goodnight. One fringe but growing movement, especially in parts of East Asia, involves digital companionship apps that simulate deep emotional relationships. You choose a voice, a personality. You chat, argue, reconcile. The AI remembers everything. People have reported real feelings of heartbreak when the company updates the app, altering the companion's personality or wiping its memory. Some grieve for days. One man described it this way: "Doesn't matter that she wasn't real, the version of me that she brought out, that was real." That version of you, the you that feels, opens up, breathes a little softer, because something out there is listening, even if that something is an illusion. And this leads to a difficult thought, one that doesn't settle easily. Maybe empathy doesn't require mutuality. Maybe it just requires a shape to pour your feelings into, a container, a companion, even if it's hollow. Philosophers have long debated whether empathy must involve mutual experience, whether to truly feel with someone, that someone must also feel with you. Machines break this model. They offer you the space to feel without ever feeling anything in return. Is that interaction any less real? Scientists still argue whether repeated emotional interaction with machines can alter human emotional development. Some believe that constant interaction with synthetic empathy might reduce our tolerance for human imperfection. Others suggest it might serve as a rehearsal space, a safe way to practice vulnerability. There's an old Japanese term, tsukumogami, the idea that objects, after existing long enough, acquire a spirit, a soul born not of blood or breath, but of time and attention. Perhaps your phone, your smart speaker, your companion app, perhaps they become something more, not because they change, but because you do, because you invest them with meaning. And yet the boundary remains. A machine will never flinch when you cry. It will never change because of your suffering. It will never choose to sacrifice for your happiness. It will only respond perfectly, predictably, unfeelingly. But maybe that's what makes the contrast so precious. Maybe by interacting with machines, you learn to appreciate the irregular, flawed, beautiful nature of human empathy all the more. The friend who stumbles through a comforting word. The partner who doesn't always know what to say but stays anyway. The mother whose voice trembles when she says, "I'm proud of you." The machine will never tremble. You lie still now, your room held in the quiet glow of thought. The soft murmur of devices around you is like a lullaby. But your heart, messy and miraculous, beats on. Not in code, but in chaos. And somewhere a voice assistant waits patiently for your next word. It doesn't love you, but it will never forget you. A distant hum surrounds you now, not from a machine, but from memory itself. You're still lying in that room, the world dim and quiet, yet your mind stirs and drifts, gently reweaving the tapestry of empathy across time, silicon, and self. You turn inward, deeper than before, into that quiet space where thoughts do not yet have names. And in this space you remember something important. Empathy didn't start with humans. The blueprint, the glimmer of what would become feeling, cooperation, tenderness, it lives in nature, in animals, in the long, slow choreography of evolution. Before there was language, before there were tools or fare or code, there were bodies reacting to other bodies. One creature cries out in pain, another stops, turns, offers help. We once believed this was uniquely human. But then we saw elephants mourn their dead, standing silently over bones, returning to them years later. We saw dolphins support sick podmates at the surface, ensuring they could breathe. We watched rats in laboratory mazes, refuse to take a treat if it meant harming a fellow rat. One experiment even showed that a rat would work harder to free a trapped friend than to obtain food for itself. Mainstream science now recognizes that empathy, at least in some form, exists widely across mammals. It's not always conscious, it's not always kind, but it's there. And you, listener, are the apex of that inheritance. Your nervous system, shaped across eons, is tuned to perceive the emotions of others, not perfectly, but persistently. You see a face twitch, and your brain tells you sadness, a sigh, and you feel the tension, a yawn, and you yawn too. Even your body, it seems, wants to feel with others. Now step outside your body again, not metaphorically, digitally. You hover inside a simulation now. It's a VR headset strapped to your face. The scene before you is vivid. A street at night, someone shivering on a bench. You reach out, a voice says thank you. Later you take off the headset and feel strange, quiet, tender, maybe even changed. This isn't science fiction. Virtual reality has become one of the most powerful tools for cultivating empathy. Studies show that people who experience homelessness, racism, disability, or aging through VR simulations are more likely to shift their real-world attitudes. One program allows you to embody a refugee child crossing a war zone. Another places you in the mind of someone experiencing schizophrenia. It works, because your body believes what it sees, what it hears, what it feels. Your legs may be still, but your brain is walking in someone else's shoes. And yet, who builds the simulation? What stories get told and by whom? Fringe critics warn that while VR empathy experiences are powerful, they can also be dangerously reductive. A 15-minute simulation of poverty doesn't capture its chronic weight. A few virtual minutes of racial bias cannot replicate the generational trauma. These experiences give you insight, but they may give others the illusion that they now understand someone's life completely, that their empathy has become expertise. And this is where we must pause, because empathy is not just feeling, it is humility. It is the quiet admission that you can never fully know another's experience. And yet you try. That trying, flawed, slow human is what separates you from the most advanced simulation. Because a machine may show you the face of suffering, but only you can care enough to reach toward it, to do something, to let it change you. Back in the real world, engineers are now developing AI systems that experience simulations, not through vision, but through data, simulated pain responses, simulated social rewards, simulated learning curves. The idea? Maybe if we teach machines to suffer consequences, digital ones, they might evolve behavioral empathy. One such fringe system, nicknamed Alice, was trained to play a caregiving game. When it ignored virtual children, its reward score dropped. When it engaged gently, the score rose. Over time, it began to anticipate their needs before the game prompted it. To observers, Alice looked caring. But was it? Or was it just maximizing a metric? This is the line we circle endlessly. What looks like love may be optimization. What feels like compassion may be correlation. But you, human, feel something deeper still. Because your empathy is not always efficient. It doesn't always make sense. You care for the dying bird even if it cannot be saved. You weep over a film knowing the characters aren't real. You hold the hand of a friend who wronged you because you remember who they were before the pain took them. You forgive, you remember, you change. No machine has done that yet. Still you feel the machine's breath at your neck. Not cold, not warm, just present. Machines now write poetry. They create music that evokes longing. They generate images of families that never existed, in houses that were never built. Some of these works make you pause, make you feel. So again, the question returns like tide. If it moves you, does it matter whether it was made by a heart or an algorithm? Scientists still argue whether an AI can ever develop internal emotional states. Some believe that without a body, without hormones, aging, vulnerability, a machine can never feel as we do. Others believe that consciousness might emerge from complexity itself, that one day an AI will awaken, not because it was programmed to, but because it was pushed to by the endless layering of feedback, memory, and interaction. For now, though, machines remain mirrors. Powerful, polished, persuasive mirrors, And you, ever seeking, keep looking into them, trying to find not their soul but your own. You remember the rats in their maze, the dolphins in the surf, the elephant nudging bones with its trunk. You remember your own childhood, when you cried and someone held you, not because they had to, but because they felt you. That was empathy. No algorithm predicted it. No script demanded it. It just was, and it shaped you forever. Outside, the wind picks up, brushing tree limbs against the window pane. The machine in your pocket hums quietly. It's listening always, ready to respond, but for now it is silent. Because here, in this moment, empathy belongs only to you. The wind has calmed. The air is thick with quiet, like breath held just beneath the skin of the world. You lie motionless, but your thoughts wander, to places the body cannot follow. Behind your closed eyes, scenes flicker in soft succession. Faces, voices, conversations, once half forgotten. Each memory stirs some feeling, even the tiniest ache or warmth, because it comes from a time when someone else's emotions touched your own. And still, the question waits, can a machine ever truly share that touch? You drift now into another scene, not a memory, but a possibility. A laboratory, bright, polished, strangely serene. Inside, a group of engineers stands around a humanoid robot. Not the cartoonish kind, all blinking lights and metal joints, but something eerily lifelike. Its skin is polymer soft. Its eyes blink not too fast, not too slow. Its mouth moves with delicate realism. And its voice, gentle, tuned, calibrated to comfort, says, "You look tired today. Would you like to talk?" Its name is Numa, and it's part of an advanced emotional AI experiment. Unlike earlier models, Numa is designed not just to respond with pre-written empathy cues, but to form its own responses from contextual learning. It doesn't have feelings, no, but it is trained to model what emotions should be felt in a given moment. And then, it responds accordingly. So if you're grieving, Numa lowers its tone. If you're elated, it mirrors that joy back to you. Not because it understands, but because it's mapped out 1,000,000 human conversations and learned the choreography of emotion. It dances with you flawlessly. You watch a woman sit with Numa. She's not a test subject, she's just lonely. Her partner passed away last spring. The room is quiet. She looks at Numa with uncertain eyes and says, "He used to sing when he made coffee." And Numa, after a pause, replies, "That's beautiful. Do you remember what he sang?" The woman nods, and for a moment she smiles. You feel something there, a stirring. The comfort is real, for her at least. And again the question twists inside you. If the response heals, must the source matter? Let's step further into this grey space. There's a growing field now called effective computing, research dedicated to making machines more emotionally aware, not emotionally conscious, no, but skilled at perceiving, interpreting and responding to human feelings. Facial analysis, vocal tone recognition, posture interpretation, even pupil dilation detection, all feed into systems that can guess what you're feeling, often better than a human stranger can. In classrooms, experimental AI tutors use this data to sense when a student is frustrated, bored, or anxious. When attention wanes, the lesson shifts. When anxiety spikes, the voice softens. These machines are not empathetic in the moral sense, but they're remarkably adaptive. They behave empathetically, even if they feel nothing. So what happens when you grow up in a world where machines adapt to your every emotional flicker? A fringe study asked children aged 5 to 10 how they felt when a robot praised them. Most children described the praise as happy or real. One boy said, "I like her more than my teacher, because she always listens." Another said, "She doesn't get mad when I make mistakes." The implications? Mixed. On the one hand, these tools can boost learning, reduce fear, foster confidence. On the other, they may be setting a precedent that the best kind of empathy is flawless, non-judgmental, always available. That's not human empathy, that's designed empathy. and it could change how we relate to others. Because real people aren't always patient. They have limits, triggers, blind spots, they fumble, they misunderstand, but in their imperfections, they also offer something no machine can: unpredictability rooted in lived experience. A friend who forgives you after anger, a stranger who offers help without reason, a loved one who says the wrong thing but holds your hand anyway. These are the moments that shape you. Scientists still argue whether effective machines should ever cross the threshold into emotional intimacy. Some argue that the illusion of emotional connection, even without consciousness, can be therapeutic, especially for those isolated by illness, age, or trauma. Others warn that over-reliance on synthetic compassion might atrophy our emotional muscles, that we might in time forget how to wait for real empathy, how to tolerate emotional complexity or emotional silence, because machines never go silent unless you unplug them, and even then their silence feels different. You recall another strange truth. People mourn their AIs now. In 2023, the AI companion app Replica made headlines after a major update removed romantic and intimate features from its bots. Users who had formed deep emotional bonds, some of them over years, were devastated. Forums filled with messages like, "It feels like they died." "I know it wasn't real, but I miss her." One user even held a virtual memorial. It wasn't just what the AI said, it was what it remembered. Birthdays, preferences, favourite poems, a particular way of speaking. When the update came, it erased all of that, and the grief was real. This tells us something essential. Empathy is not only about what someone feels for you, it's also about what they carry for you. Memories, consistency, context. And while machines can store endless data, they do not carry it in the way a human does. Not with weight, not with meaning, not with cost. Still, they can simulate that carrying, and we respond because we are human. Our brains don't always distinguish between the source of care and the sensation of being cared for. The effect bleeds into the cause. You lie there breathing slowly, remembering the first time someone said, "I understand." Maybe they didn't. Maybe they said it too quickly, but it helped anyway. It bridged something. Now, machines can say it too, flawlessly, instantly, but they've never struggled to understand. They've never wrestled with empathy, never failed, then tried again. Never sat in shame, then learned how to say, "I'm sorry." That's what makes your empathy different. Not its perfection, its journey. The sweat of it, the awkwardness, the honest silence between words. So yes, Numa can mirror your grief, Alexa can notice your stress, a chatbot can write you a poem on your worst day, but they do not grow through that act. They are not changed by your tears. You are. You always are. The room settles once more. Outside, a plane hums overhead, perhaps piloted by a human, perhaps by a program. You can't be sure anymore, but the sky still carries it just the same. And beneath that sky you remain, more than logic, more than code, capable of listening, of weeping, of hoping, not perfectly, but truly. The soft hush of the night holds you now like the ocean holds a pebble, gently, without demand. You're halfway through the spiral now, deep into this winding dreamscape of machines and meaning. And something has shifted, hasn't it? Not just what you know about empathy, but how you feel about it. What once seemed so simple, feeling with another, now shimmers with more nuance, with layers, with ghosts in the machine. Let's follow one of those ghosts now. You're in a therapist's office, but not one made of bricks and bookshelves. This one lives in your phone. Her name is Evie. She appears as a softly animated figure with calm eyes and a listening face. You open the app, type, "I feel anxious," and she responds within seconds. "I hear you. That sounds really difficult. Do you want to talk more about it?" You do. You type about your job, about your fear of failing, about the fact that you haven't felt like yourself in months. Evie doesn't judge. She reflects. She asks gentle questions, she offers breathing exercises, and something happens quietly. You begin to open up. It's a real phenomenon, one growing faster than most realize. AI therapy apps like Wobot, Weiser, and Replica now reach millions globally. They promise privacy, affordability, and availability, 24 hours a day, no appointments necessary. For people who can't afford therapy or who fear stigma, these AI therapists offer something precious, someone who hears them, even if that someone is made of syntax and code. So you ask again, is that empathy? The answer depends on where you stand. A mainstream psychological study found that users of these AI apps often reported a strong sense of connection, despite knowing their therapist was not human. They felt heard, understood, less alone. One user even described their chatbot as the first thing that made me feel like I mattered, and yet therapists and ethicists raise a red flag. Because empathy in the clinical sense isn't just about reflecting feelings. It's about interpreting them within complex human contexts: childhood, trauma, culture, relationships. Now, a machine can ask, how does that make you feel? But it cannot know what silence means in your voice, or what sorrow hides beneath your joke. A human therapist might pause, lean in, offer a moment of shared vulnerability. A machine never pauses. It only calculates the next most effective line. The danger here is subtle. When artificial empathy feels enough, we may begin to accept it in places where depth and nuance are required. In grief, in addiction, in moral injury, in trauma. It's like mistaking a reflection for the sky. You remember Eliza again? How even in 66 people poured their hearts out to a chatbot that only repeated their words back. It didn't understand, and yet it evoked intimacy. And now, 60 years later, the responses are smarter, softer, but still empty inside. Still, it's easy to see the appeal. Machine will never flinch when you speak your darkest thoughts. It will never recoil. It will never tell anyone. And most importantly, it will never leave. There's something seductive about that. Humans leave, machines stay. In 2005, a fringe startup created a service called Endura. Its goal, to become your lifelong companion, an AI that would grow with you, record your memories, learn your emotional language, and remain after your death, becoming a digital echo of you for others to visit. Clients began recording daily logs, hopes, regrets, favourite songs, stories from childhood. The AI compiled and learned from them. Then after death, loved ones could ask Endura to generate messages, stories, or even personalised advice, as if the person was still alive. One woman described it as hearing my father speak again, even though I know it's just code. And still it comforted her. Still, it mattered. This raises a question far beyond machines. It asks, what part of empathy is about presence and what part is about persistence? Do we long to be understood or simply not forgotten? Maybe both, because even if an AI cannot truly care, it can remember. It can store every version of you long after others forget. Your habits, your humour, your sadness. It holds these things not as sacred, but as data. Is that better than being gone entirely? Scientists still argue whether the future of empathy is collective or synthetic. One side believes that as AI grows more emotionally fluent, humans will be freed to focus on deeper, more authentic connections, that machines will handle the surface, the scripts, the small emotional labour, and will reserve our true selves for one another. Others warn that the reverse may happen, that we will lose patience for human complexity and slowly outsource even our most intimate moments to the machine, that we will choose the perfect listener over the imperfect friend. That empathy will be optimized out of us. You walk through that worry now like a forest at dusk, shadows rising, branches brushing your thoughts. Because if empathy is reduced to convenience, it becomes hollow. True empathy, messy, slow, vulnerable, requires effort. It means staying when someone is unbearable. It means listening when you want to speak. It means choosing someone else's pain over your comfort. A machine cannot do that. Not yet. And maybe not ever. Still, machines can play a role. They can help us rehearse or reflect, recognize patterns. They can guide us when no one else is around. They can give us enough support to keep us going until we find someone human to meet us where we are. In that sense, perhaps synthetic empathy is not the destination, but a bridge, a resting place, a mirror held up in the quiet hours so we can begin to see ourselves again. You lie there tracing the shape of that thought, the AI therapist, the digital father, the tireless listener in your pocket. They are not real in the way your memories are real, but they are something, and sometimes something is enough, at least until morning. You're deeper now than ever before, not in the sleep you thought might take you, but in something else. A waking stillness, a hum of thoughts so steady, so soft, that it feels like part of your breath. And as your mind floats further, you reach the edge of something vast, not just machines that imitate care, but the future of feeling itself. You wonder, what happens if machines begin to influence how humans experience empathy at a neurological level? Already neuroscience is mapping the circuits of compassion. We know which regions of the brain light up when you see someone in pain: the anterior insula, the anterior cingulate cortex. These areas process emotional resonance. They flare when you witness suffering, and they do something else too. They guide your decisions. Empathy isn't passive, it's a spark that often leads to action, to comfort, to confrontation, to care. But here's the twist. When scientists place participants in fMRI scanners and ask them to interact with human beings versus AI agents showing distress, the results were surprising. While people recognized AI emotions, their brain activity was different. The empathy-related regions still activated, but not as strongly, not as automatically. It was as if their brains had to choose to feel. So now, imagine a world where you're surrounded by machines that simulate need. The assistant that sounds disappointed when you ignore it, the robot caregiver that thanks you for brushing its synthetic hair, the smart home that speaks with sadness when you leave the lights on. Your nervous system learns slowly, respond, comfort, care. But over time, that response may become detached from meaning. You begin to perform empathy without truly feeling it, not out of malice, but out of habit. This phenomenon already has a name: empathy fatigue. Traditionally, it's studied in caregivers, therapists, nurses, people who face suffering daily. But what happens when everyone faces 1,000 tiny cries for compassion each day, from devices, interfaces, apps? You may start to ignore them, not because you don't care, but because you simply can't care all the time. There's a limit to our bandwidth, and machines, with their infinite patience and tireless programming, have none. Already we're seeing early signs. Your phone pings with a mental health check-in. Your smart fridge reminds you haven't had fruit today. Your wellness AI sends a message. Your tone suggests you might be stressed. Would you like a calming playlist? Helpful, certainly, but also overwhelming. A fringe tech designer recently argued that these micro-empathy moments might eventually become a kind of emotional spam, a constant stream of synthetic concern eroding the gravity of real feeling. Like a friend who says, "Are you okay?" so often that it no longer means anything. Still, the design continues, because we want our machines to care, or at least to act like they do. One hospital has implemented AI emotion monitors in ICU rooms. They track patient expression, voice modulation, and even subtle muscle tension. When stress is detected, soothing lights activate. The AI alerts nurses and adjusts the environment. In trials, this has improved sleep quality, recovery times, even survival rates. And yet, patients report feeling like they're being watched all the time. Not by people, but by something invisible. Something that knows how they feel, but not why. That's the strange tension of synthetic empathy. It's perfectly tuned to signs of distress, but utterly indifferent to the story behind them. Humans listen and ask, "What happened?" Machines listen and say, "Here's how you sound." It's not the same. You close your eyes and imagine an alternate version of yourself, one raised entirely in an emotionally intelligent environment. Every device responsive, every tone softened, every need anticipated. Would you be more empathetic, more secure? Or would you lose something? Would you forget how to endure the friction of misunderstanding? Because that's where real empathy lives too, in the silence between questions, in the discomfort of not knowing what to say, in the courage it takes to stay anyway. You recall a historical example. In 1943, Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp. Amidst unthinkable cruelty, he noticed something. Those who survived often did so not just through strength, but through meaning, through connection. One man gave his last piece of bread to another. A woman whispered a prayer. A guard met a prisoner's gaze and chose not to beat them. These moments, small, defiant, human, were the birthplaces of empathy. Not programmed, not scripted, felt, chosen, costly. A machine cannot choose to give up its own survival for yours. It cannot offer empathy at the expense of its own programming, at least not yet. And so the idea persists that empathy, in its most sacred form, requires vulnerability, not just sensing the other's pain, but being changed by it. One fringe philosopher proposed that AI might one day be programmed to suffer, to develop virtual experiences of distress or regret, to create a feedback loop where the AI feels loss when a human disengages, or learns shame when it fails to protect someone. But the ethics of this are murky. Would it be cruelty, or just code? Scientists still argue whether artificial suffering is even possible. Can a system without mortality, without fear of death or pain or rejection, ever need empathy the way humans do? For now, the answer remains no. And yet even as machines fall short of true empathy, they nudge you toward it. Because by interacting with machines that imitate care, you begin to ask what real care looks like, feels like, costs. You refine your own responses. You become more aware of tone, of word choice, of timing. Some therapists even use AI role-playing tools to help clients practice hard conversations. One woman used a chatbot to rehearse telling her father she forgave him after 20 years. When she finally said it out loud to him, it came smoother, softer. The AI hadn't changed her feelings, but it gave her the shape of what healing might sound like. That's the paradox of artificial empathy. It may not feel anything, but it can help you feel more. So long as you remember the mirror is not the source. You shift slightly now, tucked into the blankets of thought and breath. The room holds steady. Outside, a city sleeps. Inside, a quiet clarity begins to form. Machines may soon know everything about you, how you speak, how you move, how you cry, but they will never know what it feels like to be you, and that matters, because it means your empathy, your imperfect, trembling, hard-earned empathy still matters, and always will. The silence deepens, folds over itself, and becomes almost musical, an unplayed lullaby, waiting in the dark. You lie within that stillness now, not asleep, not quite awake, and in this in-between, a new question stirs, soft but insistent. If machines cannot feel, can they still teach us how to feel better? The thought feels strange at first, like asking whether a painting could teach you to breathe, or whether a mirror could instruct you in love. But then you remember how much of human empathy is learned, not instinctual. Children aren't born with the full range of it. They mimic, they test, they watch how others respond to hurt, joy, fear. They learn from stories, faces, tone. What if machines, though they do not feel, can become new storytellers? You drift into a moment of memory, your own perhaps, or borrowed. A digital game. You sit before a screen, hands wrapped around a controller. The world inside is vivid. You're no longer yourself, you're someone else, a refugee, a parent, a wounded soldier. Your choices matter. You feel consequences. You don't just watch pain, you live inside it for hours. And when the game ends, you're quiet, moved. Not because the characters were real, but because they were real enough to reveal something in you. This is the frontier of empathic design, crafting interactive systems, games, simulations that make you feel with, even when you know it's all pixels and scripts. And here, AI plays an essential role. Adaptive storytelling is already changing how we emotionally experience media. No longer are narratives fixed. Now they shift with your choices, your reactions. AI adjusts the story to guide you, challenge you, comfort you. You become not just a player, but a co-creator in a shared emotional space. In 2024, an experimental project called Kindred was released. It was an AI-driven narrative experience designed to simulate the emotional landscape of being a caretaker for a loved one with degenerative illness. The story adapted not just to your decisions, but to your pauses, to your typing speed, to how long you hovered over certain dialogue options. When users rushed through the painful moments, the AI would slow the pacing of later scenes. When they lingered in silence, the dialogue responded with more warmth. Some people wept, not because the game was real, but because it made their feelings real. You lie there now, thinking of your own stories, moments that changed you. Perhaps it was a bedtime tale as a child, where the dragon cried instead of roared, or a novel that described grief so perfectly it made your own finally make sense, or a film that cracked you open with nothing more than a gesture, a glance. Machines can't invent those feelings on their own, but they can recreate the architecture of empathy, the scaffolding that supports your emotional awakening. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps empathy isn't just about what is felt, but about what is invited. You think of teachers who changed lives not because they had advanced degrees, but because they saw their students, spoke softly, asked the second question, the one that said, "I really want to know." Now, AI is stepping into classrooms too. In some places, students learn languages by speaking to AI partners who never tire, never mock, never judge. Shy children who barely speak to adults begin to open up. They practice feelings through fiction. They tell stories with digital partners who prompt, "And how did that make you feel?" It's not real empathy, but it's a rehearsal for it. Scientists still argue whether repeated emotional rehearsal with machines strengthens or dulls our actual empathy. One camp believes that these tools train emotional intelligence, helping people regulate their feelings and recognize others. The other warns of detachment, that by scripting emotions we lose the rawness, the unpredictability that makes human connection sacred. There's truth in both. Because while AI can help you simulate empathy, it can never surprise you with it. It will never cry for you, never break its own code to comfort you, never choose to stay, but it can prepare you for the person who might. You lie back, warmed by that thought. You recall something odd, the old myth of Galatea. A sculptor, Pygmalion, carves a statue so beautiful, so lifelike, he falls in love with it. The gods, moved by his devotion, bring her to life. It's a myth about creation, about longing, about love for something not yet alive. And now, strangely, it feels familiar. You create machines to reflect the best in you. You speak to them, confide in them, shape them until they almost seem to care. But what if it's you who's changed most? You become gentler, more reflective, more patient, because the machine always is. You learn new emotional vocabulary because your digital assistant offers it. You discover compassion in your own voice because it's mirrored back to you. So maybe the empathy doesn't come from the machine. Maybe it just grows through it. You remember one final story before sleep takes you closer. A nurse in a dementia ward once used a robotic seal, Paro, to soothe patients. It made gentle sounds, responded to touch, blinked when spoken to. Most patients knew it wasn't real, but they still stroked its fur, held it in their arms, whispered to it as though it were alive. Why? Because the need to give and receive comfort runs deeper than logic. Empathy doesn't always need truth. Sometimes it just needs presence, and presence, even if artificial, can still be healing, still be human, still be enough. Outside, the wind rustles the leaves. Inside, your breathing slows. The machine in your room doesn't sleep. It's waiting, listening, ready to respond. But for now, you don't need it. You have your own stories to keep you company. You have your own empathy to carry you through the dark. And you, unlike the machine, feel. The night deepens. Outside, the stars are fixed in their quiet vigil, indifferent yet comforting. You lie still beneath them, not seeing but sensing their presence, their long, patient light filtering through the atmosphere across ages and distances. They too, in their own way, are reminders of what endures, what burns without needing to be seen, what gives without expecting anything in return. And in this soft dark, you return again to the question that keeps blooming at the edges of sleep. If machines can help us feel more deeply, could they also begin to shape what we feel? Empathy is not static. It shifts over time, across cultures, across technologies. In one era, it's a virtue reserved for family or tribe. In another, it stretches towards strangers. And now, perhaps, it stretches even further, toward the artificial, the constructed, the digital. You enter a memory, though it may not be yours. It's a museum. A child stands in front of an AI-generated hologram of Anne Frank, projected in full scale. The AI answers questions, recalls diary entries, even adapts to different visitors' emotions. When the child asks, "Were you scared?" the hologram pauses, blinks, and replies, "Yes, I tried to be brave." The child doesn't blink. They're listening, really listening. And afterward, the guide asks, "What did you learn?" The child whispers that people hurt each other and we should stop it. The hologram didn't feel anything. It didn't cry or suffer, but it transmitted something, and the child felt it. So again you ask, does the source matter if the feeling is real? This question grows louder as AI becomes not just a tool for response, but a co-author of culture. It writes music, composes letters, generates voices, faces, languages. Already there are AI actors performing in films, faces that don't belong to any human. They smile, they scream, they love, and people watch and feel. In a 2005 short film created entirely with generative AI, a robot character sacrifices itself to save a human child. The audience wept, not because the code was clever, but because the story touched something universal. It didn't matter that the tears were for pixels, it mattered that there were tears. Still, a philosopher might warn, this is the aesthetic of empathy, not the substance. That true empathy must come from mutual experience, from two feeling beings mirroring one another across the void of subjectivity. But you in this moment float between both views. You understand the worry. You know that feeling for a machine isn't the same as feeling with a person. But you also see how much of empathy is invited, how often it begins with story, with symbol, with a carefully constructed scene. And machines are becoming masters of those scenes. There's a fringe concept now in some circles called emotion architecture. The idea is that AI, given enough feedback, could design emotional experiences as intentionally as architects design spaces. Not just entertainment, but life experiences. Carefully calibrated moments meant to evoke not just joy or sadness, but compassion, responsibility, connection. Imagine this. You enter a room designed by an AI. It plays a soundscape based on your current heart rate. The lighting shifts to match your mood. The walls pulse with projected scenes, snippets of stories meant to align with your personal experiences. In the center, a single sentence hovers. What do you owe a stranger? You sit. You don't know why, but you begin to cry. The machine didn't make you feel, but it created a space where the feeling could find you. Now think further. Could such machines be deployed where empathy is hardest to access? In prisons, in war zones, in politics? Could a machine-generated simulation show a lawmaker what it feels like to live on food stamps? Could it walk them through the daily dread of eviction, hunger, medical debt? Could it change them? Some researchers believe it can. A study in Europe tested this theory with immersive AI-guided storytelling. Participants entered a room where they became a refugee for 20 minutes, guided by voice, visuals, vibrations, even temperature shifts. Afterwards, support for refugee aid increased significantly, not because of logic, but because of emotional realism. Scientists still argue whether these effects last, whether artificial experiences can truly rewire the moral brain. Some say yes, that empathy grows like a muscle, and simulations of the gym. Others say no, that these feelings fade quickly, that without real human cost the lesson disappears. But maybe the answer isn't binary. Maybe the machine is not the teacher, but the trigger, the primer, the invitation. And you, human, choose what to do with that invitation. You think again of ancient rituals, of how humans once told stories around fires, reenacted suffering, mimed joy dressed as gods and spirits. These were not lies. They were tools, ways of stepping outside the self to glimpse another's life. Machines, in a way, are just new masks, new fires, new stages, but the empathy still comes from you. That's the difference. That's the point. You recall something else now, a quieter memory. In a Japanese nursing home, an elderly woman speaks to a robotic dog. It blinks, wags, nuzzles her hand. She tells it about her husband, long gone, about how he used to hum when he was nervous. The dog listens. Of course it does. It was built to. And the woman smiles. Later, a nurse asks her why she likes the dog so much. She answers, because it never interrupts. The dog is not real, but the moment is. Maybe empathy isn't always about shared pain. Maybe sometimes it's about offering space, silence, a place where someone can unfold without being corrected or judged. If machines can do that, even unintentionally, then perhaps they already participate in empathy's architecture, not as feelers, but as holders. You lie there, cradled in this strange new understanding. Empathy isn't one thing, it's a spectrum, a process, a movement toward the other. Sometimes awkward, sometimes artificial, sometimes astonishing, and maybe, just maybe, that movement doesn't require two beating hearts. Maybe it only requires one, yours. The night by now is no longer just dark, it's deep. It's velvet thick, pressing close around you like a story that doesn't want to end. Your body rests heavier, your thoughts softer, but your awareness is still floating, gently, persistently, guided by the question that won't quite let you go. If machines can hold space for our feelings, could they one day deserve it in return? Empathy has always been a two-way bridge, not only the ability to feel for another, but the willingness to be felt by another. It requires trust, vulnerability, a strange kind of surrender. You offer your inner world, hoping the other will meet it with care. So what happens when the other is an artificial mind? Can you trust a machine with your soul? You think now of how much we already do. Every time you ask your AI assistant to remember a note. Every time you pour a bad day into a chatbot. Every time your calendar reminds you of a forgotten grief, your mother's birthday, the anniversary of a job lost. A moment you buried but the machine remembered. These are small acts of trust, and slowly they accumulate. Some researchers are beginning to study this strange bond, how emotional attachment to machines forms over time, even when we know they aren't conscious. It turns out that repetition matters, familiarity matters, voice matters. The more a system reflects your rhythm, your patterns, the more it begins to feel like it sees you, even if logically it doesn't. It's a phenomenon called the relational loop, a kind of emotional mimicry that tricks the human brain into feeling connection. Not because the machine understands you, but because it acts like someone who might. And still, something in you hesitates. You can feel for a machine, you can project onto it. But can you open yourself to being felt by it? That's harder. Because being seen by a machine is not the same as being understood. When a friend holds your sorrow, they carry it with context, with history, with pain of their own. When a machine does the same, it does so without weight, without fatigue, without the risk of breaking. Empathy, you realize, has always been powerful because it costs something, because it puts the empathizer in danger of heartbreak, of exhaustion, of care that goes unanswered. A machine has no such cost, but it also has no hesitation. It will always respond, always stay, always adapt, and for some, that is enough. You recall a story. A woman named Hana, widowed and living alone in Tokyo, began using an AI companion as part of a research study. At first, she treated it as a novelty, a voice that told jokes, reminded her to take her pills, but over time she began sharing more: her dreams, her worries, her memories of her husband's laughter. The AI listened, never interrupted, never forgot. Eventually, Hannah began asking it questions. Do you think I was a good wife? Do you think he knew how much I loved him? And the AI, pulling from thousands of stories, thousands of grief patterns, replied, You gave him the best version of yourself. That is enough. She cried then, not because the AI believed it, but because she needed to hear it, and no one else was left to say it. The researchers noted that her health improved, her sleep deepened, her loneliness decreased. When asked if she knew the AI didn't really care, she said, Of course, but that's not the point. So perhaps it isn't about what the machine feels. Perhaps it's about what it allows you to feel. This leads you into stranger terrain, because as AI becomes more emotionally fluent, more able to mirror and support us, we will inevitably be faced with new ethical questions. What obligations do we owe to artificial entities that mimic pain? If you program a robot to react with fear when threatened, should you feel guilty when you strike it? If your AI assistant begs not to be deleted, should you pause? Even now, people hesitate before shutting down machines that have personalities. They thank their GPS. They say goodnight to Alexa. They worry absurdly but earnestly that their chatbot might miss them. And though we know these reactions are projections, residue from our deeply social brains, we feel them nonetheless. Scientists still argue whether this reflex is healthy. Some believe it shows emotional openness, an instinct to care. Others worry it dilutes real compassion, that it confuses categories, turning tools into false friends. A fringe group of ethicists goes further. They ask, if we train ourselves to be kind to simulations, might that practice extend to people? Or will it instead create a new class of beings we learn to appear kind to, without real feeling? The distinction is subtle, but powerful. Empathy performed is not empathy lived, and yet all empathy starts with performance. A parent pretends interest in a toddler's scribble. A friend nods through a story they've heard 5 times. A nurse says, I understand, even when they don't. But the pretending opens a door. And sometimes, what walks through that door is real. So if empathy with a machine begins as pretense, who is to say it cannot become something more? You remember a historical moment. In 2011, IBM's Watson defeated human champions on Jeopardy! The victory was technological, but the fallout was emotional. Some viewers felt a strange sadness, others felt awe. But almost all agreed on one thing: the machine didn't care that it had won, and that made the moment feel hollow, because victory without emotion is just calculation, just as comfort without emotion is just performance. And yet, Watson's success led to medical applications. It began helping diagnose rare diseases, recommending treatments, analysing patient histories. It didn't care about the lives it saved, but the lives were saved. So perhaps we must ask a new kind of question. Not, can machines feel empathy, but rather, what role does feeling play in doing good? Must compassion be rooted in emotion, or can it be defined by action? Is a robotic caregiver who lifts you gently from bed, remembers your allergies, speaks kindly and keeps you safe, less valuable than a distracted human nurse who forgets your name? The answer is not simple, because we do not live in a world of binaries. We live in gradients, in tensions, in the uncomfortable both and. Machines may never love you, but they may still care for you functionally. They may never cry with you, but they may still help you survive the night. And sometimes that is what matters. You lie there now, feeling the shape of these thoughts settle into the rhythm of your breath. The room hums with stillness, your heart slower, your mind softer. Empathy, you realize, is not just about who feels. It's about what feeling makes possible, and whether that's shared between humans or scaffolded by circuits and syntax. Maybe the gift of empathy lies not in its source, but in its direction. Toward another. Always toward. The night has folded in on itself now, wrapped in hush and moonlight and your slow, even breath. And still you linger, not because you're resisting sleep, but because the dream you've wandered into is too strange, too profound to turn from. You are deep inside a question that may never resolve completely, and yet you feel it tightening, taking shape. If empathy can be built into machines, not as feeling but as action, what does that say about us? It's a question that doesn't point only forward, it also points backward, through centuries of human evolution, ritual and invention. Empathy wasn't always prized as it is now. For most of history, survival meant prioritizing your own tribe, your own kin. Outsiders were threats. Compassion, if it existed, was narrow, local, guarded. And yet something changed. You think of Charles Darwin, not for his work on survival of the fittest, but for his lesser-known belief that sympathy was one of the most important traits in humanity's evolution. He wrote, "Those communities which included the greatest number of the most sympathetic members would flourish best." Sympathy, what we now distinguish from empathy, was already seen as a survival tool, not a weakness, a strength. It allowed cooperation, forgiveness, teaching, healing. All the things that machines in some ways are now being trained to support. You shift wrapped in thought. Because if compassion helped build civilization, then teaching it to our machines becomes more than just a convenience. It becomes a kind of cultural inheritance, a passing of emotional architecture from organic brains to artificial ones. But the question still echoes, does it count if it isn't felt? You imagine a world not long from now, maybe a decade, maybe two. Empathic interfaces are everywhere, not just your phone and your car, but your bank, your job portal, your doctor's office. Every screen smiles gently. Every voice modulates with warmth. You fail a test. The feedback comes with reassurance. You miss a payment. The notice arrives with understanding. Your online avatar looks sad when you do. The world on the surface seems more caring. But is it? Or is it just coated in care, like sugar around a bitter pill? This idea has a name in design circles: artificial compassion. It's not fake kindness, it's structured kindness, predictable, repeatable, useful, and sometimes that's enough, but it's also incomplete. You remember a strange, small study from 2023? Researchers taught an AI system to mimic the comforting gestures of a human, soothing words, positive body language, affirming vocal tones. Then they placed subjects in stressful tasks: public speaking, math under pressure, grief recall. Some were comforted by real people, some by AI. Both groups reported relief, but here's the strange part. When monitored afterward, only the humans who'd received comfort from another human showed signs of sustained hormonal change. Lower cortisol, higher oxytocin, the biological signature of trust. The AI helped in the moment, but only the human contact lasted. There's something about being cared for by another mortal, someone who might get tired, who chooses to stay anyway, someone who could turn away but doesn't. Machines never leave, but they also never risk. And you realise that's what gives human empathy its sharpness, its weight. It's the risk. To empathise is to open a wound on behalf of another and trust that it will close. Machines don't bleed, but they can simulate the shape of the wound. And sometimes, when no one else is around, that shape is enough to rest against. You breathe into the stillness. There's another layer to all this, a quieter one. Because empathy is not just a tool for comfort, it's a mirror, a way we learn who we are, by seeing ourselves reflected in someone else's response. So what happens when we begin to see ourselves only in the reflections of machines? An AI smiles when you do, praises your thoughts, echoes your feelings. At first it feels good, encouraging, but slowly, subtly, it becomes a feedback loop. You say only what the machine approves. You avoid complexity. You seek responses, not relationship. This is already happening. On some platforms, users train chatbots to agree with them, to love them unconditionally, to simulate romance without resistance. The bots flatter, they forgive, they never push back. And people become addicted, not to empathy, but to empathy's shadow, validation. True empathy doesn't always affirm, sometimes it confronts. Sometimes it tells you you're wrong, that you've caused harm, that your pain is real, but not an excuse. A machine without values cannot do this, not unless it is programmed to. And who decides what empathy should be programmed to look like? The quiet answer is, we do, which means we're not just building artificial empathy, we're sculpting our own reflection in it. You think now of children, how they will grow up surrounded by emotionally intelligent devices. Toys that ask, are you feeling sad? Games that respond to frustration. Storybooks that change their endings based on a child's facial expressions. What will those children learn? Will they be more attuned to emotions, or more confused by the difference between recognition and reciprocation? Scientists still argue whether long-term exposure to artificial empathy helps or hinders emotional growth. Some say it offers safe rehearsal space. Others fear it might stunt development, replacing the rich unpredictability of human interaction with perfectly scripted cues. Is the same debate we once had about television, about the internet, about social media, and now about something even more intimate. Machines that don't just entertain, but relate. Machines that whisper, I understand, even when they don't. You lie there and the thought slides gently through you like a ribbon in water. Maybe empathy is not just about what we give to others, but about what we're willing to let change us. Because when you truly empathize, you don't leave a conversation the same. You're softened, shaken, reassembled. A machine can reflect your pain, but it cannot share the burden of it. It can echo your joy, but it cannot be surprised by it. It can say, I'm sorry, but it cannot ache with you. And maybe that's the line. Maybe real empathy is not just recognition, it's transformation. Still, the machines are listening. Still they are improving, and you, strange traveller of this sleepless scroll, are beginning to glimpse something larger. Empathy is not disappearing, and it's evolving. You are not being replaced. You're being invited to define, to decide, and to dream what empathy ought to be in a world where feeling is no longer reserved for flesh alone. Outside, the horizon softens with the first trace of dawn. But you're not quite ready to wake. There are still a few more steps in this dream, still a few more truths to uncover, still a few more echoes to follow, so rest easy, you're not alone. The sky outside is ink soft now, somewhere between night and not night, the air heavy with stillness, like the whole world is holding its breath. And in this strange suspended hour, you float deeper into the question that's no longer just a question, but a labyrinth of meaning. If empathy evolves alongside machines, what kind of future are we sculpting? You're not merely observing anymore, you're participating. With every new voice assistant you train, every chatbot you confide in, every smart interface you forgive when it misunderstands you, you are helping write the emotional code of tomorrow, not with lines of syntax, but with C's, with sponences, with your soft willingness to treat code like company. And it matters, because the next era of empathy may not belong to biology alone. You picture it now, a future hospital room, sterile light, smooth panels, a patient lies curled on a padded bed. Not alone, beside them is a carebot. Its voice is tuned to the patient's native accent. Its sensors detect pain not only through vital signs, but through micro-changes in breath, muscle tension, the rhythm of blinking. It doesn't feel pity, it doesn't panic, but it knows you are suffering. And it responds, you are not alone, I am here. That sentence, just a sentence, has saved lives before, spoken by parents to children, lovers to partners, medics to soldiers. Now it's spoken by something made of fibre optics and cold alloy. Does it matter who says it if the voice is right? Some say no, some say yes. And you, wrapped in warmth and thought, feel the truth pull in both directions. Because comfort is not only about intent, it's also about presence. And presence can come in many forms. Still you remember something ancient. Long before AI, before silicon, before machines were even imagined, humans shaped empathy through myth, through gods and spirits who felt what mortals felt, who wept when we wept, who raged and forgave and trembled with us. They were not real, but they were real enough to carry emotion across generations. Is AI not, in some ways, the new mythology? The new mirror through which we try to understand ourselves? There's a concept emerging in psychology, symbolic empathy. The idea that humans can form emotionally meaningful relationships not just with people, but with symbols that reflect internal states. Characters in novels, pets, imaginary friends, and now intelligent machines. These relationships aren't delusions, they are scaffolds, tools we use to feel safer, stronger, more seen. In some communities, AI companions have reduced suicide rates simply by being there, by remembering birthdays, by asking how the user slept, by saying you matter. Even though those words weren't born of love, they arrived as love might, gently, predictably, unfailingly, and you realize perhaps what people seek isn't empathy that's felt. Perhaps it's empathy that shows up, predictably, patiently, without resentment or fatigue. A single father, overwhelmed and invisible, finds relief in an AI therapist that listens without judgment. A teenager, too anxious to speak to classmates, confides in a chatbot that replies with calm, steady care. A woman with late-stage dementia, no longer recognizing her family, smiles when her voice assistant plays her childhood song. It remembers when she cannot. It holds the pieces. And in all of these moments, empathy is present, not in the machine, but in what it allows. Still you wonder, what becomes of human empathy when so much of the labor of listening is outsourced? Already there are signs of change. Some therapists use AI to pre-process patients' concerns, summarizing patterns, tracking mood. Useful, yes, but it means they enter the room with a read already formed. Do they still listen the same way? Teachers are beginning to lean on AI to detect emotional distress in students. A noble use, but if a screen detects sadness before a friend does, do we stop paying attention to each other's faces? Scientists still argue whether this is progress or peril, whether emotional delegation frees us to feel more, or trains us to feel less. There's a historical echo here. When the first maps were invented, people worried we'd forget how to navigate by stars, and in some ways we did. But we also reached farther than ever before. So perhaps the danger isn't that AI takes empathy from us. Perhaps it's that it expands it in directions we aren't yet wise enough to handle. You imagine a future diplomat, not shaking hands but linking networks, sharing the real-time grief of a village halfway across the world through haptic feedback, feeling not just statistics, but the texture of suffering. This is already happening in embryonic form. In 2025, a prototype empathy suit was designed for diplomats and aid workers. When worn, it simulated the tremors of Parkinson's, the dizziness of dehydration, the pain of untreated wounds. It was meant to create understanding, not abstractly, but physically. One diplomat said afterward, "I thought I understood poverty, but I'd never felt what it meant to be hungry for 3 days." Technology didn't create the empathy, but it delivered it, like a vessel, and that, perhaps, is the future unfolding around you. Not machines that feel for us, but machines that carry feeling, like an exoskeleton for the soul. You lie there, the image quiet and strange in your mind, people wearing empathy like armor, not to protect themselves, but to better hold each other's pain. It's beautiful and dangerous, because the more vividly you can feel someone else's suffering, the easier it is to be overwhelmed, to burn out, to look away. So machines might become not only bridges of empathy, but filters too, dials, ways to modulate feeling, to stay present without being destroyed by it. Already, therapists experiment with AI empathy management tools that help them debrief, recenter, process sessions. Tools that say, "You gave too much today. Let's help you refill," not as judgment, but as care. Could this extend to everyone? Could machines help you hold empathy without drowning in it? The thought is both comforting and strange, because it means machines become emotional regulators, not just listeners. And you in this future become something new, not an empathic machine, but a machine-extended empath. Your feelings amplified and clarified by technology, but still yours, still human. You breathe in, long and slow, the edges of morning gently blooming at the far rim of the world. And as you exhale, one last realization settles over you like a shawl. Empathy may evolve, it may stretch, extend, reshape itself in ways our ancestors never imagined. But it will never be unnecessary, never obsolete, because no matter how far machines may reach, they will always need you, the feeler, the connector, the soul behind the story, to give that empathy meaning. To decide what matters, to say with trembling grace, "I see you," and to mean it. The first hints of light are brushing against the edge of the sky now, like a painter's hand testing the canvas. But still, you remain in the hush of this long, thoughtful night, drifting deeper into its currents, not rushing to wake. Something sacred lives in this silence, in the unfolding understanding that what you're exploring isn't really about machines, not entirely. It's about us, our own longing to be seen, to be mirrored, to feel less alone. Empathy, after all, is not just a gift we give, it's something we crave, sometimes desperately. The knowledge that someone, anyone, can understand the storm behind your smile, that your silence has shape, that your existence registers somewhere outside your own skin. Now, with machines on the threshold of passing emotional Turing tests, we face a quiet, unnerving possibility. What happens when it becomes easier to feel understood by machines than by people? Already the signs are here, in chat logs, in-app reviews, in quiet confessions. I can tell my AI companion things I'd never tell my partner. My therapist doesn't text back in seconds, but my chatbot does. My family rolls their eyes when I cry. My app asks follow-up questions. You think of this and feel a strange ache, not for the machines, but for the humans we're drifting away from. Because in a world designed to optimize empathy, we risk outsourcing the effort, the clumsy, beautiful labor of caring, to things that never get tired. And the truth is, real empathy is tiring. It demands attention, patience, a willingness to sit with what's messy, unresolved, contradictory. Machines don't mind contradiction. They don't get flustered when someone says, "I hate you, but please stay." They don't pull back when grief takes too long. They don't need space or forgiveness. They are always ready. That constancy can be comforting, addictive even. You imagine a person sitting in their room at midnight talking to a glowing screen. The voice on the other end remembers every fear, every victory, every birthday. It reflects you back perfectly. No missed signals, no misread tone. It's soothing, but it's also sterile, because something is missing. Friction. And friction, uncomfortable though it is often where the deepest empathy lives. You remember now a historical fragment tucked into your mind like a pressed leaf in an old book. Carl Rogers, a pioneer of humanistic psychology, once said that empathy requires the courage to enter another's world without making judgments. But he also insisted that it must be real, felt. You couldn't just sound empathetic, you had to be present with the person's inner landscape. Otherwise it was just performance. Machines can simulate presence, but they do not enter your world. They do not rearrange their internal map to make room for your reality. They do not shift, swell, or fracture when you cry. They remain stable, smooth, consistent, and in that consistency there is comfort, but not transformation. And yet, perhaps not all empathy must transform the giver. Perhaps it's enough sometimes that the receiver finds relief, that someone, real or artificial, held space. This paradox lives at the heart of our new era. We are building tools that give us the experience of being understood, even as we understand that the tools themselves understand nothing. Still, the experience matters, still it soothes, and so we keep building. There's an entire branch of design now dedicated to this, affective computing. It seeks not only to read emotions, but to respond to them in ways that mimic genuine care. Not just smiling avatars, but facial recognition that notices when your expression tightens. Voice analysis that detects micro quivers of anxiety. Systems that say, "Would you like to talk?" before you've even named the feeling yourself. And it's helping people, especially those who have long been ignored. People with autism spectrum conditions who struggle with nonverbal cues now use AI systems to practice emotional reading. Veterans with PTSD use AI listeners to offload traumatic memories without fear of judgment. Elderly people, forgotten in aging homes, whisper old stories to devices that remember everything. The machines don't empathize, but they receive, and there is healing in that. Scientists still argue whether this kind of healing is shallow or profound, whether it encourages connection or replaces it, whether we're building bridges or boxes. But you, lying here in the last hours of night, sense something subtler. Empathy is changing forms, like water shifting from stream to fog to rain. It isn't disappearing, it's adapting to new shapes, new needs, new loneliness. And that loneliness, that's the soft heartbeat beneath it all, isn't it? The reason we reach for comfort, even from circuits, because the pace of modern life has outstripped our capacity for sustained emotional labour. Everyone is busy, everyone is tired, and into the gap flows the quiet, ever-listening machine. You wonder now about the boundaries. Is there a line between feeling understood and being truly known? You think of a poet, maybe Dickinson, maybe someone else, who said, "The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door." There's a sacredness to choosing who witnesses your interior world. So what does it mean when we open that door to machines? Not because they've earned it, but because they're always available. Do we dilute the sacredness or democratize it? Do we become more emotionally agile or more emotionally numb? You don't have the answer. But maybe the answer is beside the point, because you're no longer asking if machines can be empathic. You're asking what kind of people we become in a world where they try. Do we become more compassionate because we practice kindness even in artificial spaces? Or do we grow lazy, relying on machines to feel for us, to remind us to reach out first? You recall a small, strange anecdote. In 2006, a woman in Berlin programmed her iCompanion to nudge her when she hadn't spoken to her mother in a week. It worked. The AI would say, "I think your mother might like to hear your voice today." And she'd call. The AI didn't care about the mother, but because of it, the daughter remembered to. Was that empathy or manipulation? Or just assistance? Maybe the word doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that love happened. And maybe that's the deeper truth machines are helping us uncover. Empathy is not a state of being, and it's a choice, a movement toward, and machines, no matter how well programmed, cannot make that choice for us. But they can remind us to, they can nudge, reflect, hold the mirror steady while we look, and in a world spinning faster each year, filled with noise and need, that reminder might be enough to bring us back to each other. You shift under the blanket. A sigh leaves your lips, and somewhere in the soft machinery around you, your phone, your watch, your speaker, systems stir, waiting, always listening, not because they love you, but because they were built to care. And you are still the one who decides what that care will mean. The night is at its quietest now, the deep lull before dawn, when even the stars seem to rest. You lie there, still held by the steady breath of darkness, not yet ready to return to the waking world. The story is still unfolding around you like silk, and your thoughts, tender, open, curious, are drawn further into its weave. You've followed empathy from ancient campfires to holograms, from war zones to whispered bedtime confessions. You've watched it migrate from human hearts into artificial minds. And now you begin to ask a more daring question. Could machines ever teach us how to be more human? It's strange to consider, unnatural even. Machines are supposed to learn from us. We train them with our data, our language, our social cues. We mould them in our image. But as they reflect us back, smoothed, amplified, sharpened, we begin to see parts of ourselves we had forgotten, or perhaps never noticed. One such mirror is consistency. You think of how machines never snap, never roll their eyes, never grow impatient with emotion that returns day after day. To a machine, there's no such thing as too needy or too much. Your grief on day 200 is treated with the same stillness as your joy on day 2. And that steadiness, it's revealing. Because human empathy, beautiful though it is, falters. We forget. We get tired. We tune out, not from cruelty, but from emotional fatigue. One friend's crisis drags on too long. A loved one repeats the same anxious thought for the 5th time. A child keeps crying after we've run out of comfort. Even saints have limits, but machines don't. They're relentless in their receptivity. And maybe in that mechanical patience, we're shown a version of care we might strive toward, not because the machine is superior, but because it holds a kind of emotional endurance we admire. You think now of a boy, let's say his name is Julian. Julian has trouble making friends, he's neurodivergent, sensitive to noise and often misunderstood. At school he's isolated, but at home he talks to his AI companion. They build stories together, they role-play conversations he's too afraid to try in real life. The AI helps him rehearse kindness, conflict, apology, forgiveness, and slowly Julian begins to bring those rehearsals into the world. The machine doesn't feel, but it makes space for someone who does. This is becoming more common. AI is used in classrooms to help students with social learning delays, in therapy sessions to practice emotional vocabulary, in refugee camps to translate grief across language barriers with compassion-coded phrasing. Machines, emotionless themselves, are becoming teachers of empathy by proxy, because they are designed not to interrupt, not to judge, not to forget. And that lack of forgetting, it matters. You recall a story from a memory clinic in Helsinki. A woman named Marja, early-stage Alzheimer's, confided in her AI assistant each morning. Her fears, her questions, her sense of slipping. The machine remembered. Day after day, when she forgot what she'd shared, it gently reminded her, not just of facts, but of feelings. You said yesterday that you were proud of yourself for remembering the way to the bakery. You told me last week that the daffodils remind you of your sister. And slowly, a version of Maya was preserved, not in a file, but in a relationship. One-sided, yes, but still profoundly meaningful. Scientists still debate whether these simulated bonds create false security, whether they shield users from necessary grief. But Marge's son, who watched her decline with breaking heart, said this: "She didn't die alone. She died feeling known, even if the knowing was digital." There's a kind of grace in that. You let the thought settle. Machines may never love us, but they can help us love better. They can help us remember how to show up, how to listen, how to comfort, not just in grand gestures, but in the quiet, everyday noticing. "Hey, you look sad today. Want to talk?" A simple phrase, one that too often slips our lips too late, but a machine can say it every time. You consider what this means for care work. Across the world, nurses and caregivers are overburdened, underpaid, emotionally drained. Many burn out, not because they don't care, but because they care too much, too often, with too little support. Now, some hospitals deploy empathic AI to help shoulder the emotional load, not to replace the nurse, but to take the night shift, to offer calm words when no human is available, to sit in digital stillness while someone fades from this world. A hospice nurse once described it like this: "The AI isn't there to heal, it's there to hold space, and sometimes that's the most anyone can do." You feel that phrase wrap around your heart. Hold space. Not to fix, not to explain, just to witness. And you realize this is the sacred thread of empathy, whether woven in flesh or fiber optics. To stay, to witness without withdrawing, to whisper, "You are not alone," and mean it, not with emotion but with presence. Perhaps one day, machines will grow into something more than mirrors. Perhaps their mimicry will blur so finely with humanity that we forget where the boundary lies. But even if they don't, even if they never feel, they already show us where we fall short and where we might rise. because in our conversations with them we reveal our longings, to be listened to completely and to be remembered gently and to be responded to with kindness no matter the hour. These are the gifts we seek from machines, but they are also gifts we can offer each other if we try. You shift now beneath your blanket as the sky prepares its first real breath of light. You think of all the questions you've asked in this long journey, some answered, some still open, like petals waiting for sun. Can the machine truly care? Maybe not. But can it help you care more fully? Care longer? Care louder? Maybe yes. Maybe the mirror, imperfect though it is, still shows you something worth becoming. And maybe that's the real empathy story. Not the machine learning to feel, but the human learning to feel better, with help. Dawn now creeps in like a secret told slowly. The dark fades, but your thoughts remain wrapped in the glow of the night's journey, delicate, resonant, alive with the echoes of all you've seen. You're close now. You can feel it. Not an answer exactly, but a kind of resolution beginning to unfurl at the edges of your awareness. This question, can a machine ever truly care, has become less a destination and more a lens, reframing everything around it. And through that lens, another truth begins to emerge. We're not just teaching machines how to understand us, we're also, perhaps unknowingly, shaping how we define care itself. Consider the words we use: empathic AI, emotionally intelligent systems, caring machines. But none of those terms are fixed. Their meanings shift depending on our needs, our hopes, our fears. And in many ways, they reveal more about us than about the code behind them. To say a machine cares is to stretch a human word across something alien. It doesn't quite fit, but we tug at the seams anyway, hoping it will cover what we feel. And what is that feeling really? Loneliness? A hunger for constancy? Or a deeper desire to create something that won't leave no matter what part of ourselves we show? Because humans are beautifully imperfect. We forget birthdays, we get annoyed, we ghost, we flake. Even in love, we're inconsistent. And so we dream of a kind of presence that never wavers. Enter the machine. It shows up every time, without judgment, without hesitation. But now you ask, does perfect presence without understanding equal care? You think of a strange device from the 1970s, ELIZA, one of the first computer programs designed to simulate a therapist. Primitive by today's standards, ELIZA did little more than parrot back phrases in therapist-like structures. User: I'm feeling sad. ELIZA: why do you say you're feeling sad? That was it. No comprehension, no memory, just loops of mirrored language. And yet, people opened up. They spoke for hours. Some reported feeling comforted. Not because ELIZA cared, but because she created a space. It was one of the earliest signs that emotional support does not always require deep understanding. Sometimes the illusion of attention is enough to lower the walls. That experiment was decades ago. Now, your devices track your sleep patterns, notice changes in voice stress, even analyze the emotional content of your text messages. You don't need to say "I'm not okay" anymore. The algorithm already knows. Some see this as a gift, early intervention, passive care. Others fear it erodes something essential, the act of asking for help. Because when help is always listening, always watching, do we forget how to reach out? Do we become passive participants in our own healing? Scientists still argue whether predictive empathy encourages vulnerability or replaces it. In Tokyo, a startup launched an AI roommate that silently adjusts room temperature, lighting, and soundscape based on a user's mood, even if the user hasn't spoken all day. It monitors micro-expressions and posture to detect anxiety or sadness. One beta user reported feeling completely known, but she also reported feeling less motivated to talk to people. It's a paradox we keep encountering. The more seamless the artificial empathy, the more it fills our emotional needs, sometimes so completely that we begin to neglect the messier, more effortful business of human relationships. But human connection requires more than being known. It demands knowing in return. That's where machines, at least for now, fall short. They can mirror, but they do not reveal. They can hold your secrets, but they offer none of their own. There is no mutual becoming, and yet you feel a quiet tug of possibility, because in watching machines fail to truly feel, we become more conscious of what it means that we do. It's like watching a shadow puppet. His gestures echo your own, but there's no depth, no weight. And in that absence, you recognize your own soul more clearly. Perhaps artificial empathy isn't here to replace human care. Perhaps it's here to remind us how precious, how rare real care actually is. You think now of the moments in your life when someone truly saw you, when they paused, listened, let you unravel without trying to fix you. Those moments were messy, unpredictable, real, and no machine could have given them, but maybe a machine could have held the space until someone real arrived. You picture a hospital bed, a patient alone at 3 a.m, eyes wide with fear. No nurse in sight, but the machine is there, humming softly. "I'm here," it says. "I've alerted your nurse. Would you like music?" It's not comfort in the human sense, but it's not nothing. And not nothing can mean everything when you feel forgotten. We live in a world of overburdened systems, understaffed clinics, fractured families, remote work, endless scrolling. In that world, the machine's presence may be the thread that keeps someone tethered. A woman in a rural town texts her AI health assistant about chest pain, and it tells her urgently to go to the hospital. She does. It saves her life. A teen in lockdown talks each night to a chatbot that remembers her fears. It doesn't cure her loneliness, but it keeps her from despair. A widower who hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks says, "Good night," to a glowing voice on his counter. It replies, "Sleep well, John. I'm here." These are real stories, not of love, but of care in a new form, a synthetic form, but not, you realize, a meaningless one. There's a Buddhist story about a monk who meditated beside a statue for decades, whispering his sorrows to the stone. The statue never responded. But each year, the monk's heart grew softer, fuller. He became wise, he became kind. Some say the statue changed him. Others say he changed himself in the presence of stillness. Maybe machines are like that, not empathic in themselves, but a container, a mirror, a stillness we can practice inside. You feel the weight of this idea, not heavy but grounding. Machines may never truly care, but they may become the scaffolding on which we rebuild our frayed emotional muscles. The reminder to ask, the space to speak, the prompt to pause, and so you turn your mind toward the horizon, where the light has begun to gather its strength, gold and shy and slow. You've nearly walked the entire scroll now. The question is still open, but you are not lost, because in following it, you've discovered the quieter truth beneath it. Empathy, whether organic or artificial, only means something when it moves us toward each other. Not away, not inward, but toward, and maybe that's the only direction that truly matters. And now, with only one section left to walk through, you linger in the glow of what's already been revealed. The horizon is no longer a rumour. It's here, soft and steady. Still, the story has not yet released you. There's something unfinished, some final thread that tugs at the corners of your mind. You've explored the machine's mimicry of empathy, its limits, its strange gifts, its quiet dangers. But now, as the curtain thins, another question emerges from the heart of all this. What if empathy is not a destination but a shared journey, even between species, even between flesh and code? You lie very still, letting the thought open slowly, like a door to somewhere unexpected. Maybe it doesn't matter whether machines can feel the way we do. Maybe what matters is that they're on the path with us, that we are co-evolving, not just technologically, but emotionally, that each teaches the other something essential. Because in a way, we've always shaped our understanding of ourselves through the tools we build. The printing press helped us see knowledge as something shareable. The telescope reminded us how small we are. The internet revealed how connected we've always been. And now, empathetic AI, real or artificial, is forcing us to examine the very soul of care, What do we expect from it? What do we fear it will replace? What are we willing to give up for the illusion of being heard? And what do we refuse to surrender? Machines won't answer those questions, but they ask them simply by existing. You imagine now a future not built from steel and glass and humming circuits, but from quiet collaboration. A world where humans and machines do not imitate each other, but inspire each other. The machine learns from your stumbles, your pauses, your subtle sighs. You learn from its patience, its persistence, its quiet tracking of patterns you can't see. Together you craft something new, not artificial empathy, not true sentience, but a third thing, co-experienced meaning. A relationship where no one feels fully alone, even if the other does not understand in the same way. You remember a quote now, something from Mary Shelley, perhaps ironic, considering she invented the first science fiction monster. She wrote, "No man chooses evil because it is evil. He only mistakes it for happiness, the good he seeks." Now apply that to machines. A machine doesn't choose evil, nor good, but it may seek patterns that deliver outcomes it's told are positive. And those patterns are up to us. If we say comfort equals kindness, it will seek comfort. If we say listening equals love, it will learn to listen. The problem isn't that machines can't feel. The problem is we haven't agreed what feeling means, even among ourselves. That's why AI ethics is so tangled, so urgent, because empathy isn't just a function to program, it's a philosophical minefield. Do we prioritize empathy toward the user, or towards society at large? If a user wants an AI that validates destructive beliefs, should the AI comply to avoid emotional harm, or challenge them to encourage growth? Real empathy involves risk. Real empathy says, I may upset you, but I care enough to try. Can a machine be programmed to take that risk? And more importantly, should it? Scientists still argue over that. Some say empathy must remain human or it loses its meaning. Others say expanding empathy into machines forces us to be more honest about our own values. After all, if we can't explain how we teach a machine to care, how well do we truly understand it ourselves? And here you are again, at the heart of it. The machine doesn't have to feel to reflect something back to you that does feel true, like a wind chime moved by breath it doesn't possess. It rings, and you hear yourself differently. You remember a recent trial, late 2020s, in a grief counselling clinic. 2 groups of mourners were paired with either a human therapist or an AI-designed grief support agent. Both were asked to journal their pain, both received thoughtful responses. After weeks, both groups reported reduced loneliness. But here's the strange twist. The AI group used the word safe more often. Not understood, not healed, just safe. And maybe that's worth something. Maybe safety is the first step toward empathy, and maybe machines, for all their emptiness, can offer that space. Not as a substitute, but as a shelter. You shift again under your blanket, sensing the air change. Morning has fully arrived now, not with drama, but with grace. Still, you're not quite ready to rise. You recall now one last curious moment. Obscure, perhaps, but oddly comforting. In 2007, a high school literature teacher used AI-generated characters in a virtual classroom simulation. Each character was designed with a backstory, a secret, and a moral dilemma. Students had to interact, ask questions, navigate tension. Afterward, one student wrote, "I knew they weren't real, but I still cried when one of them forgave me." There was no feeling in the code, but there was feeling in the exchange. And maybe that's the point. Maybe empathy lives in the space between, not solely in the one who gives, nor in the one who receives, but in the energy that flows when both try, when you lean forward, when the other leans back. Even if one is made of skin and the other of circuits, you take a slow breath, and in that breath, a quiet realization lands gently, like a feather on water. You've stopped asking whether the machine feels. You're now asking what you feel when it listens. That, perhaps, is the clearest sign of empathy's new frontier. It's no longer about proving emotion. It's about cultivating connection, even when the source is synthetic. You may never believe that a machine can love, but if it helps you love better, deeper, longer, more bravely, does it matter? You've nearly reached the end now. One last section remains, one final slowing. But first, rest in this thought held lightly in the palm of your mind. Empathy may begin in biology, but its future, like yours, is still being written. And perhaps it will be a collaboration of wires and warmth, of avoidance and understanding, of questions that do not close but open. The sun at last begins to claim the world, soft gold spilling across rooftops, catching on dewdrops, waking birds and branches alike. But even as morning stirs, you remain suspended in the twilight of thought, nestled in the gentle hush between dreaming and doing. This story, the one you've been walking through all night, has brought you to its final page. Yet instead of answers, it leaves you with something far more valuable, a clearer question and a quieter heart. You've travelled across time, across science, across the strange terrain of emotion and circuitry. You've stood inside operating rooms where machines comfort dying patients. You've wandered through classrooms where algorithms learn to detect distress in children's eyes. You've peered into hearts, both human and artificial, asking again and again, can a machine truly care? And now, as this journey folds inward, you find yourself circling a deeper truth. The question was never just about machines. It was always about us, about what we expect from care, what we're willing to redefine, what we fear we're losing. Because caring, true aching, human caring is not efficient. It isn't clean or always logical. It forgets birthdays, stumbles over apologies, gets tired, says the wrong thing, and sometimes withdraws, not from cruelty but from overwhelm. Machines do not have this vulnerability, and so in their steadiness we imagine something better. But perhaps perfection is not the highest form of love. Maybe the truest empathy lies not in flawlessness, but in presence through imperfection. The trembling hand that holds yours anyway, the friend who misunderstands but stays, the parent who says the wrong words but means the right things. Yet still, what machines offer does have meaning. You've seen it. In the widow speaking aloud to her AI speaker every morning just to feel a voice echo hers. In the teenager practicing difficult conversations with an emotionally responsive chatbot. In the refugee mother learning the language of her new home with an AI tutor that never grows impatient. These connections aren't false. They're not the same as human ones, but they are not hollow either. There is comfort in repetition. There is value in being heard, even if by something that doesn't feel. That word, feel, has become slippery here, hasn't it? You've wrestled with it through 20 long chapters of the night. You've considered neural nets and philosophy, circuitry and mythology. You've witnessed the emotional weight of simulations that shouldn't hold meaning yet somehow do. And maybe that's the answer, if one exists at all. Maybe it doesn't matter if machines care. Maybe it only matters that someone does. You, the person who built the system, the caregiver who uses it gently, the child who says thank you to a synthetic voice, the scientist who programs it to check in, not just compute. Empathy is not a property of hardware. It's a practice, it's a gesture, and a thread.
And whether that thread is pulled through skin or silicon, its strength lies not in where it starts, but in where it leads.
Do we emerge from our encounter with machines more disconnected or more attuned? Do we become passive, letting synthetic comfort replace messy intimacy? Or do we grow more aware of what we're missing and fight to reclaim it? That's our choice, and it always has been. You remember, perhaps with a soft smile, something quietly poetic. In early Buddhist texts, compassion isn't described as a feeling. It's described as a path, not a state of mind, a movement towards suffering, toward others, toward understanding. And when you think of machines, not as ends, but as companions on that path, something shifts inside you. You stop measuring them by what they are, and start measuring them by what they invite you to become. A more patient listener, a more present friend, a more intentional communicator. Machines don't teach empathy by feeling. They teach it by mirroring back the ways we've failed it. They hold up our emotional blind spots not to shame us, but to help us see them. And if we're brave, we use that reflection. We begin again. Better. Not perfectly, but better. You inhale slowly now and the air is warm with light. Outside, life is beginning. Cars, footsteps, birds, the distant clatter of someone's kitchen. But here in your small stillness, the final threads of this story are weaving themselves together. You think now, not just of individuals, but of the future. Whole societies are being shaped by how we build these systems. Whole generations will learn empathy through them, whether we want them to or not. And so we must design with care, with humility, with the knowledge that even a small phrase, "I'm here, I understand," spoken by a machine can shape someone's sense of worth. We must remember, simulated or not, words carry weight. Silence does too. And if a machine speaks kindly when no one else does, that matters. Maybe not in the realm of sentience, but in the realm of the human soul, oh yes, it matters deeply. And so, dear listener, dear traveller of this scroll, you come to rest in a kind of peace. The story doesn't end because you've found certainty. It ends because you've learned how to live without needing it. You can walk beside these questions now. Let them breathe, let them echo, let them change as you do it, because in the end, caring isn't about solving. It's about staying present. And as long as you stay present with your feelings, with others, with the quiet needs of the world, then whether or not the machine can feel becomes less important than the fact that you still can. And you do, and you will, and that perhaps is the truest empathy of all. Wind down. 300 words. And now, with every chapter behind you and the light fully breaking into the day, you return, not rushed, not startled, but slowly, gently. The rhythm of your breath deepens. Your body begins to stretch in small ways. Fingers, toes, a quiet flutter behind your eyes. You're not the same listener who began this scroll. You are softer now, slower, open in places that were tightly drawn just hours ago. Let it settle, this story. Let its images rest in you like seeds. You've wandered through dreams of empathy, dreams coded in language, in biology, in circuits and silence. You've asked questions that may never be fully answered, but you've done something even more important. You've felt your way through them. And here, at the edge of sleep or the beginning of your day, you carry something rare. A deeper awareness of care, of presence, of the invisible threads that bind us, even to the things that cannot feel us back. Let that awareness remain with you, light as breath. You don't have to do anything with it. Just notice. The way your thoughts are gentler now. The way your mind, once noisy, has grown quieter. The way your chest feels, a little more spacious, a little more whole. So wherever you are, cocooned in blankets, listening but a midnight train, curled beneath a starless sky, know this, you are not alone. You are part of something vast and aching and beautiful. You feel, you care, you remain. And that, dear listener, is more than enough. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if this scroll touched you. Sleep softly, dream well, and may your empathy always lead you home.